All right, so we're going to be doing a deep dive today on how to prepare for a health and safety officer interview.
Yeah, sounds good.
We've got a whole bunch of resources from RoleCatcher to help people really get ready for this.
Yeah, these resources are amazing, especially if someone's trying to get ready for an interview in this field, because it really is all over the place.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about ensuring workplace safety and compliance in offices. You could be in a hospital and you're dealing with infection control, or you're in a lab working with radiation safety.
It's really interesting how many different industries and places this type of role can be found in.
Yeah.
And the RoleCatcher Career Guide for Health and Safety Officer shows us that there's projected to be 6% growth. So a lot of people will be needed for this.
Yeah, that's great news for anybody going into this field for sure.
That is great news for them.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's jump into some questions that someone might be asked in one of these interviews. So this one comes up often. Describe your experience in developing and implementing health and safety policies and procedures. What do you think the interviewer is really looking for with a question like that?
Yeah, I mean, this is where you really want to prove that you can actually do it, not just talk about it, right?
Yeah.
So you really want to give specific examples.
Okay.
You want to demonstrate that you deeply understand how to make safety protocols from scratch.
Okay.
And that you can actually put them into practice effectively.
So it's one thing to say, I'm familiar with safety procedures,
Right.
but it's another thing to really paint them a picture.
Right. You want to tell a story.
Yeah, okay.
So, for example, maybe you found a potential hazard and created a new safety policy to address it.
Right.
Or led a training on handling hazardous materials.
Yeah.
You really want to be as specific as possible so that the interviewer can see that you're not just familiar with it, but you've done it.
Right. Yeah.
And you've had an impact.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about some pitfalls that people should avoid when answering this question?
Yeah. You definitely want to stay away from being vague,
Okay.
Avoid mentioning policies that never actually got implemented
Right.
or weren't very successful. This is really your time to shine, to show your wins and make it clear that you can create safety measures and that they actually work.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Oh.
Now, RoleCatcher actually has this really neat AI feature
Oh, yeah.
that can analyze job descriptions and tell you what skills you might be missing
Oh, wow.
from your resume or CV.
Okay.
So if you're using that, you can tailor your application to each specific job that you're going for and make sure you're not forgetting to mention any crucial skills.
Yeah. That's amazing. It's almost like having a career coach like right there with you.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay, so we talked about developing safety policies, but what if they follow that up with something like, can you tell me about a time when you had to persuade someone to follow a safety policy they were resistant to?
Oh, yeah. That's a good one. So now they're trying to see how well you work with other people. And if you can really get people to see your way of thinking when it comes to safety, because that's a big part of the job.
Absolutely. It's not just about knowing what the rules are. It's about getting people to follow them.
Exactly.
All right, let's look at another question. So this one is, how do you stay up to date with health and safety regulations and industry standards? Now, this one seems pretty straightforward, but I'm sure there's more to it than just saying, oh, yeah, I read all the regulations.
Yeah, they really want to know that you're dedicated to constantly learning and that you're really proactive about staying ahead in the game.
Okay.
Because this field is always changing.
Yeah. So how can someone show that they're really on top of things?
Be specific about what you do to stay updated.
All right.
Talk about any professional development activities you participate in, like conferences, workshops.
Okay.
Have you joined any organizations like the American Society of Safety Professionals?
Okay.
Do you subscribe to industry publications or online blogs?
Gotcha.
They want to see that you're really a part of the safety community, not just aware of it.
Yeah. So you're actually putting the effort in to stay current with everything.
Right.
Now, RoleCatcher can help with this too.
How so?
Their AI can actually give you feedback on how you answer interview questions.
Really?
Yeah. And it can even suggest how you can improve your answers to make a stronger impact.
Wow. It's almost like having a practice interview.
Yeah, it is like having a virtual mock interview
Yeah, that's fantastic.
to make sure that you're communicating everything in the best way possible.
Yeah, and hopefully you'll get hired.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so let's move on to a question that's more hands-on. This one is, can you describe your experience in conducting safety audits and inspections? And this is where I feel like it goes beyond just knowing the rules on paper and we get into actually doing the job.
Right. It is about actually applying what, in a real world situation.
Yeah.
So have you actually gone out there and identified safety hazards and assessed risks and recommended improvements?
Right.
You really want to walk them through a specific example.
Okay.
maybe talk about a safety audit that you conducted.
Okay.
How did you go about it? What tools did you use?
Uh-huh.
Did you find any major hazards? Did you use any particular software or methodologies like HAZOP?
So can you explain what HAZOE is?
Sure. So HAZOP stands for Hazard and Operability Study.
Okay.
It's basically a structured way to examine a process
Okay.
to find and evaluate potential hazards.
Okay.
So you'd get a team of experts together
Yeah.
and you brainstorm all the ways things could go wrong.
Okay.
You look at what might deviate from normal operations and you think about what the consequences could be. It's really useful for being proactive about risk.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So by mentioning something like HAZOP, you're really showing that you have a deep understanding of risk assessment.
Right.
Okay, so what are some things people should avoid mentioning when talking up safety audits?
Don't be vague.
Okay.
You don't want to imply that you just followed a checklist.
Right.
The interviewer wants to see that you can actually think critically and that you're good at solving problems. So don't just mention audits that didn't go well or where you didn't really do much. You want to showcase how effective you are and how much attention you pay to detail.
All right. That makes sense. Let's move on to another question that might feel a bit more intense.
Okay.
It's, can you describe your experience in investigating safety incidents and accidents? This seems like it would take a very specific skill set.
Oh, yeah, definitely. With this question, they're trying to see how you act under pressure.
Right.
Can you stay calm and think clearly when something bad happens? They want to see if you can gather evidence, talk to witnesses, figure out the root causes, and then come up with ways to prevent it from happening again.
So how should someone structure their answer to show those qualities?
The best thing to do is to pick an incident from your past where you played an important role in the investigation.
Okay.
You want to briefly describe what happened, but don't focus too much on the negative stuff.
All right.
Instead, focus on the process. How did you approach the investigation? What methods did you use to collect information? Did you use root cause analysis? What were your main findings?
Yeah.
And most importantly, what did you recommend to stop it from happening again?
Can you explain what root cause analysis is?
Yeah, so root cause analysis is basically a way to figure out the underlying reasons why something happened.
Nope.
So instead of just fixing the symptoms, you're trying to dig deeper and find the real cause.
Okay.
There are tools you can use for this, like the 5 whys technique or fishbone diagrams.
Well, yeah.
It's all about tracing back the chain of events to pinpoint exactly what went wrong so you can fix it properly.
So you're not just reacting to what happened, you're trying to prevent it from happening ever again.
Exactly.
And that's a valuable thing to highlight in an interview.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's say you describe the investigation really well. What kind of follow-up question might you get?
They might want to know more about your recommendations.
Okay.
So they might ask, how did you make sure your recommendations were put into practice?
Okay.
Or what challenges did you face in trying to implement your recommendations? They want to see that you can follow through and get things done.
Yeah, it's one thing to come up with solutions,
Right.
but it's another to actually make those solutions happen.
Exactly.
Now, RoleCatcher's Career Guide has some really good advice about this.
Okay, what's that?
It talks about showcasing your accomplishments, not just listing your responsibilities on your resume.
Okay.
So instead of just saying, I developed safety procedures,
Right.
you could make a portfolio that highlights specific projects where you made a real difference.
That's a great idea. It brings your experience to life.
Exactly. Okay, let's shift gears a bit and look at this question. How do you ensure that employees understand and comply with health and safety policies and procedures? This seems like it's about creating a real safety culture.
Absolutely. They want to know that you can make safety everyone's priority,
Right.
not just a set of rules on a wall.
Yeah, and it takes more than that.
Right.
So what are some good things to mention when answering this question?
Talk about how you communicate safety information to people. Do you do training sessions,
Yeah.
presentations? Do you use visuals?
Okay.
Do you have regular reminders, maybe toolbox talks?
Right.
The more creative you are, the better.
Yeah, I like that. What are some things people should avoid saying?
Don't say things like, I just make sure everyone can read the policies.
Yeah,
That shows that you're not actively involved in creating a culture of safety.
gotcha.
And don't talk about methods that didn't work.
Okay.
You really want to highlight the things that you did that got people to take safety seriously.
All right, so let's say you've given them a really good answer about creating a safety culture. What kind of follow-up question might you get?
They might ask you something like, can you give me an example of a time when you had to deal with an employee who just kept breaking the safety rules?
Okay.
That's to see how you handle conflict and how you can uphold the standards even when it's difficult.
Yeah, it shows your leadership skills
Exact.
and your commitment to safety.
Right.
Speaking of commitment, RoleCatcher's Career Guide talks about the importance of networking in the safety community.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
It says that joining organizations like ASSP can help you connect with other professionals
Right?
and find mentors.
Yeah, that's invaluable.
Yeah, it's all about building relationships and learning from people who've been there.
Right.
Okay, let's move on to another important topic. Can you describe your experience in developing and implementing emergency response plans? This seems pretty high stakes.
It is. This is about thinking ahead and being ready for anything.
Yeah.
They want to know that you can anticipate potential problems and create plans that might actually save lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what are some things people should highlight when answering this question?
Focus on a specific emergency plan that you created.
Okay.
Briefly describe the emergency you were preparing for.
Okay.
But then spend most of your time talking about what you actually did.
Got
How
you.
did you assess the risks? What resources did you need? Who did you involve in the planning process? Did you do any drills or training to make sure everyone knew what to do?
Yeah.
The more detail you can give, the better.
Okay, what are some common mistakes to avoid when talking about emergency response plans?
Yeah, you don't want to be too vague.
Yep.
They want to hear about concrete steps and procedures, not just general statements.
Gotcha.
Don't focus on plans that never actually got put into action.
Okay.
And definitely don't talk about plans that failed during a real emergency.
Right. All right, so let's say you've impressed them with your emergency preparedness.
Okay.
What kind of follow-up question might you get?
They might ask, how would you evaluate how well an emergency response plan worked after it was used in a real situation?
Okay.
This shows that you're always thinking about improving things
Right.
and learning from what happened.
Yeah, it's all about continuous improvement and making sure things are as effective as possible.
Absolutely.
Now, before we wrap up this first part of our deep dive, I wanted to bring up something from RoleCatcher's Career Guide.
Sure, go ahead.
It talks about the importance of certifications,
Oh, yeah.
especially the Certified Safety Professional credential.
The CSP.
Yeah.
That's a good one to have.
Yeah, it shows that you're really serious about your career,
Right.
and it can open doors to more opportunities.
Definitely something to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so that wraps up part 1 of our deep dive.
We'll be back with more tips and questions in the next part.
So stay tuned.
Yes, don't go anywhere. All right, so welcome back to our deep dive on getting ready for your health and safety officer interview.
Yeah, let's keep going with those sample questions.
Okay, sounds good.
So this one often comes up. Tell me about a time you had to deal with a conflict involving safety. This seems like it could be a real test of how well you handle those tricky situations.
Yeah, for sure. This question is all about showing that you can resolve conflicts and stay professional even when things get a little heated.
Yeah.
They want to see that you can stand your ground on safety issues,
Okay.
but also keep those good working relationships.
Yeah, that's important. Okay, so what would be a good example of a conflict to share with the interviewer?
You could talk about a time when you had to address a safety concern that was being ignored.
Okay.
Maybe a coworker wasn't following proper procedures,
Right.
or a supervisor was pushing for deadlines that compromised safety.
Yeah.
You could even talk about a time when you had to question a decision that you thought was risky.
Okay, so when you're describing the conflict, how should you structure your answer?
You want to start by briefly explaining what the conflict was,
Yeah, okay.
what were the specific safety concerns,
Huh.
and then you want to walk the interviewer through how you approached it.
Gotcha.
Did you try to talk it out first? Did
Yeah.
you have to go to someone higher up?
Right.
What steps did you take to make sure safety was the top priority?
Okay, those are good things to highlight. What are some things people should avoid saying?
You don't want to come across as aggressive or like you're blaming people.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Even when safety is really important, you have to stay professional. Don't talk about conflicts that never got resolved or ended badly.
Right. You want to show that you can solve problems.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's say you describe the conflict and how you handled it really well.
Mhm.
What kind of follow-up question could you get?
They might ask you, what did you learn from that experience and how has it changed how you approach safety now?
Okay.
So they want to see that you're always learning and trying to improve.
Yeah. It's not just about fixing that one problem.
Right.
It's about getting better overall.
Exactly.
Okay, let's talk about training now. Here's a common question. How would you go about implementing a new safety training program? This seems like a question where they're looking for your planning and organizational skill.
Definitely. With this question, they want to see that you can create a program that's engaging and informative
Okay.
and really tailored to what the employees need.
Gotcha. So what are some key steps you should mention in your answer?
First, you want to talk about doing a needs assessment. You can't design a program without knowing what the employees actually need.
Right. You have to figure out what they already know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What are their skill gaps? What tasks or hazards do they need to be trained on?
Yeah, okay. And then once you know what they need, how do you go about developing the actual program?
Right. Well, you could talk about using a mix of methods,
Well,
like lectures, hands-on activities, group discussions, maybe even online modules.
I like that. You're really catering to different learning styles.
Right. It's important to keep things interesting and make sure people are actually learning.
Absolutely. And after the training's done, you don't just forget about it, right?
Of course not.
Yeah.
You have to evaluate how effective it was.
So how would you do that?
You could use quizzes, observations, feedback surveys,
No,
even performance reviews later on to see if the training actually stuck.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's all about making sure the training actually leads to safer practices.
Exactly.
Now, this is another area where RoleCatcher's AI can be really helpful.
Oh, how so?
It can analyze those job descriptions and tell you what specific skills might be lacking.
Okay.
So you can design training that directly addresses those gaps.
Yeah, that would make the training super targeted and effective.
Exactly. All right, so let's say you've impressed them with your training plan. What kind of follow-up question might they ask?
They might throw a curveball and ask, how would you handle an employee who just refused to participate in the new training?
Okay.
That's to see how well you can motivate people and deal with those who are resistant to change.
Yeah, you have to be a leader and get everyone on board.
Exactly.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about another common challenge. How do you prioritize safety tasks when you have multiple things demanding your attention? I imagine this happens all the time in a busy workplace.
Oh, yeah, all the time. This question is about showing that you can manage your time well
Okay.
and make tough decisions when you're under pressure.
So what are some things that would impress the interviewer?
Well, first and foremost, you have to make it clear that safety is always your top priority.
Yeah, that's a given.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Then you want to describe your system for prioritizing tasks.
Okay.
Do you have a way to categorize them based on how urgent they are?
Uh-huh.
Do you talk to supervisors or other people involved?
Right.
Do you use a planner or a to-do list?
Okay, so you want to show that you have a system.
Right, a system that works.
And what are some things to avoid saying?
Don't just say that you do whatever your boss tells you to do first.
Okay.
That makes you sound like you don't take initiative.
Gotcha.
And don't talk about systems that haven't worked for you in the past.
Right. You want to show that you're capable and that you can get things done.
Exactly.
So what kind of follow-up question might they ask about prioritization?
They might ask for a specific example.
Huh.
Tell me about a time when you had to choose between a safety task and another important task. How did you decide and what happened?
Okay, so they're really putting you on the spot
Yeah, they want to see how you think under pressure.
and how committed you are to safety.
Right.
All right, before we move on, I wanted to mention something else from RoleCatcher's Career Guide.
Oh, yeah, what's that?
It talks about the importance of networking in the safety community.
Yeah, that's so important.
Joining organizations like ASSP can really help you connect with other professionals and find mentors.
Absolutely. It can open so many doors.
It's all about building relationships and learning from other people's experiences.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, so let's tackle another classic interview question that can sometimes be intimidating. What are your greatest strengths as a health and safety officer? This is your chance to really shine.
It is. This is where you get to sell yourself.
Yeah, and show what makes you the best candidate.
Exactly. So they want to see that, your strengths.
Okay,
And that those strengths align with what's needed for this role.
so what are some good strengths to focus on?
You want to pick strengths that are directly relevant to the job.
All right.
Are you a good communicator?
Oh.
Are you a great problem solver?
Uh-huh.
Are you creative when it comes to finding safety solutions? Are you passionate about workplace safety?
Okay.
And you want to back up those claims with examples from your experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. What are some common mistakes to avoid?
Don't be arrogant or try to pretend you're perfect.
Okay.
Confidence is good, but overconfidence is not.
Right.
And don't just list strengths that you can't back up with examples.
Gotcha.
And it's okay to admit that you have weaknesses. Everyone does.
Yeah, being honest about your weaknesses shows that you're self-aware.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that you're willing to learn and grow.
Okay, so let's say you've done a great job describing your strengths. What kind of follow-up question could you get?
They might ask, how would you use your strengths to deal with the specific safety challenges of this role or this organization?
Oh, okay.
So they want to see that you've done your research
Right.
and that you're really thinking about how you would fit into their workplace.
It's about going beyond the generic answers
Yeah.
and showing that you're really interested in this specific company. Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive. Are you ready for the final round of questions?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay. So we're back for the last part of our deep dive into getting ready for that health and safety officer interview.
We are going to make sure you're totally prepped for anything they might ask.
Yes, we've already gone over a lot,
Yeah,
but there are always those curveball questions that can pop up.
exactly. So let's look at one that interviewers often like to use. Tell me about a time you had to make a tough decision about safety. What were the challenges and how did you deal with them?
This one seems like it's really about showing your judgment and how you handle pressure.
Yeah, it is. They want to see that you can make those tough calls when safety's involved and not just rely on your technical knowledge.
So what kind of situation would be a good one to share with the interviewer?
You could talk about a time when you had to balance safety concerns with other things like deadlines or budget limits.
Okay.
Maybe you had to stop a project because of a hazard that came up. Or you had to push for an expensive safety upgrade even though people weren't happy about it.
All right, so how should you structure your answer to really showcase your decision-making process?
Start by briefly describing the situation and the decision you had to make.
Okay.
What were the different factors you had to consider?
Okay.
What were the potential risks if you chose one option over the other?
Uh-huh.
Then walk them through how you came to your decision.
Gotcha.
Did you collect more information? Did you talk to experts?
Okay.
Did you look at any regulations or guidelines?
Yeah, so you're showing them that you didn't just make a random guess.
Exactly. You had a process and you were thorough.
Okay, so what kind of follow-up question might they ask about this tough decision?
They might ask, what happened after you made the decision and were you happy with the results? Looking back, would you do the same thing or would you handle it differently?
So they're really digging into your thought process and seeing if you learned from the experience.
Exactly. They want to see that you're always growing and reflecting on your decisions.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, let's switch gears to a question that can be a bit awkward. What are your salary expectations for this role? This is always a tough one.
Yeah, you don't want to sell yourself short, but you also don't want to scare them away with a number that's too high.
Exactly. So how should someone prepare for this question?
The most important thing is to do your research.
Yeah.
Find out what other health and safety officers are making.
And where can you find that information?
You can look at websites like RoleCatcher Glassdoor.
Okay,
Even professional organizations like ASSP usually have salary data.
gotcha.
And there are online calculators that can give you a general idea of the market rate.
Okay, so you go in armed with information.
Exactly.
Know your worth.
Now, what if the interviewer pushes you to give them a specific number?
Instead of giving a hard number right away, you can offer a range.
Okay.
Like, based on my experience and what I've seen, I'm looking for something between X and Y.
And what if their offer is lower than your range?
You can politely explain that you were hoping for something higher.
And highlight your skills and experience to justify your expectations.
Right, so it's all about being prepared to negotiate.
Exactly. Know your worth,
Yeah.
and don't be afraid to advocate for yourself.
Good advice.
Mm.
All right, let's wrap up with a question that can sometimes throw people off. Why are you interested in working for our organization specifically?
Mm-hmm.
This seems like it goes beyond just liking safety as a field.
It does. This is where you show them that you've done your research on their company.
Okay, so what kind of research did you do?
Look at their website, read their mission statement, see what their safety policies are.
Okay.
Look for news articles or press releases about their safety initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
You can even check out employee reviews on Glassdoor to see what people are saying about the company culture.
So you really want to get a feel for what the company is all about,
Exactly.
and then how do you tie that into your answer?
Talk about how your values and goals align with theirs.
Okay.
Mention specific things they do that show their commitment to safety. Maybe you admire their leadership or their work on a particular safety issue.
Yeah, you want to show that you're genuinely interested in working for them.
Exactly.
And what are some things to avoid saying?
Don't give them a generic answer that could apply to any company.
Okay.
And don't focus on things like salary or benefits.
Right. Those things are important.
They are.
But this isn't the time to bring them up.
Exactly. It's about showing them you're passionate about their mission.
Okay, well, that was a great overview of some common health and safety officer interview questions and how to approach them.
Hopefully this deep dive has given everyone the tools and confidence they need to ace their interview.
Absolutely. And remember, RoleCatcher has a ton of resources to help you prepare even more.
Definitely check them out.
Good luck with your interview.
You got this.